I didn't grow up thinking I'd run a brush clearing business, but here we are. Okay, so in this video today, I wanted to go over some of the questions that I've seen people ask us on social media, some of the stuff people have messaged us. So we'll just do a video going through all of these. It might be interesting for you guys. So yeah, so the first one is, what were you doing before Brushworks? Before Brushworks, Zach and I actually owned 3 retail stores. And we entered into that kind of a very regulated market. So it was like vape and smoke shops. And we kind of saw the writing on the wall with the regulations coming out that, eventually we weren't going to be able to keep these stores going with these regulations. They were kind of tightening everything, and we had to start something new. So Zach had run other like heavy equipment and stuff before we started, so it wasn't a completely foreign concept to us. And I had done a lot of marketing, so I owned a digital marketing agency as well. But we did the vape industry for about 8 years before we got into this business. So what made us think about brush clearing? My wife and I bought a property with about 5 acres, and about 4 acres of it was wooded, and it was just full of honeysuckle. It sucks when you buy all that property and you can't use it, right? So I wanted to find a way to get rid of all this brush. And so I called a guy down in Kentucky. I couldn't find anybody in Ohio. And I kind of just randomly came across this guy, and I had him come out and he did a little clearing on my property. And so I was like, man, I really think that this is a business that I could do, that Zach and I can get into. So yeah, we kind of looked into it and saw, like, is it worth it? Can we afford the equipment? Is it something that we have the knowledge to do? So yeah, we just decided we could, and we went to Bobcat and found the equipment and got a trailer. And the truck is an interesting one. So the truck we actually got from Zach's brother. Zach's brother works for an excavation company and does excavating. And he had this Dodge Diesel 2500 that had been converted to a dually. And we put airbag suspension on it so that it would be able to handle the weight. And also the 2500 was important to us because it kept our load under 20,000 pounds. Anything over that, we would require a CDL. So yeah, we got all that equipment and we got to work. So what was the very first job we did? The very first job we did was just north of Wilmington. It was for a customer who her father passed away and left them this property. And this property had been vacant for 15 years or so. Became really overgrown. I think it was like 4 acres, 5 acres. And we cleared most of it. So she was our first customer, and she's super nice. And she was really cool about us coming out and filming. And that's kind of how we got our first video. And funny enough, the first video is our most viewed video. And yeah, and from there, we just kept going. The question is, did you already have the equipment? We didn't. We went out to Bobcat to get it. We had no customers lined up. We had a general idea of how we were going to sell this kind of service. We had no idea how much demand there was for it. We just kind of knew from driving around town, growing up in the area, that people were going to need this kind of service. And we just took a leap. So we didn't know. We put out a lot of money with no guarantee it was going to pay off. So the other question is, how did you come up with the name Brushworks? So Brushworks was, honestly, we just used ChatGPT. So we plugged into ChatGPT like what we wanted to do, and had it spit out some names for us. Now we did kind of go through them and figure out like, we like this, we don't like this. It was also important that a domain name that's decent would be available. So yeah, pretty easy. I mean, we wanted something that would kind of define what we do by reading the name. But we also have people that think we're a painting company, and I got a pretty good discount at Sherwin-Williams. So they asked if I owned a company, and I was like, yeah. And they were like, well, what's the name of it? I was like, Brushworks. And they're like, oh yeah, we can get you a totally good deal on paint. And I'm like, okay, great. So I get a good deal on paint with this name. So what did the early days look like? I would say we're kind of still in the early days. We started it last year, kind of early last year. Early days were interesting. So, I mean, we started running ads. We used some video footage to make the ads. We took a lot of photos. And it's been hitting the ground running ever since. I mean, it's just a constant flow of leads coming in, customers. I mean, it's really just been go, go, go since we started. We are, weather dependent, so sometimes we get shut down for weather, or in the winter we got shut down because it was a wet winter. So, but yeah, we've been just hitting the ground running since we started. So the question is, how do we get our first few clients? So our first few clients came from ads. So we ran Facebook ads. We built the website. We ran Facebook ads to the website. We set up, other social media stuff. It wasn't until later on that we started getting quite a few customers from YouTube, from doing our YouTube videos. But now we get kind of customers from all over the place. A lot of referrals. So we still get a lot from ads, and we also get a lot from our YouTube videos. Okay, so what were some early lessons that we had to learn the hard way? Okay, so early lessons we had to learn the hard way. I would say the biggest one is quoting. When you first start out, you don't necessarily have a general idea of how long it's going to take. That's kind of something that comes with experience. So I do all of our quotes. So I had to be at every job and just see like, okay, this is how far we're getting. This is, what's affecting it. When we first started, we just did like a day rate. And then, I tried to do a method that would be a little bit more accurate and give like a full job amount. So I would do like the acreage size, and then I would, rate the brush density, rate the terrain. And that didn't work. So that idea kind of sucked. People didn't really like that. They liked the idea of the per day price. So we ended up just sticking with the per day price. So some other things that we learned is, so service is what you're buying when you're buying equipment. The cost of the equipment, while expensive, when the business is running and going well, the cost of the equipment is negligible compared to the cost of the service of the equipment. You want to go with equipment that has very, very good service reputation. And the reason is because if you've got your equipment goes down and you're down for a week, I mean, you're losing quite a bit of money. You're getting pushed back on your schedule. Your schedule's so short, you've only got from March to November if you're lucky, and you're going to have a lot of rainouts in between there. So any time that's cut off of your schedule is really damaging to the business, and then the customers get upset because they had to get pushed back for your equipment being down. So really you're buying the service, not the equipment. So while some equipment might be more expensive, quite a bit more expensive than others, if they have better service, then you buy that equipment. So that was probably another big lesson we learned early on. Did I ever doubt it would work? Not really. So I did quite a bit of research before we started. I looked up like is there a demand for this service? And my background is in marketing, so I knew, searching keywords, stuff like that, getting keyword traffic data, and I could see that there was a big demand for this stuff. Like it was at the time, I remember it was about 80% of the traffic that concrete work gets. So put that in perspective, like how many people are looking for concrete work? A lot. And how many companies service concrete? Probably 1,000 just in Cincinnati, right? So if this service was getting 80% of that web traffic, then that tells me that, okay, well, I need to look at how many companies provide this kind of service. And at the time I was looking, I couldn't find maybe two, and then the other ones weren't even, the two that existed weren't even really advertising this service. They were kind of tree service companies who were very large and big enough to just own this equipment, and they made enough money to where they could just let it sit, and they would just do those kinds of jobs every now and then. So yeah, I would say that's I didn't really doubt it. So I kind of knew when we started, but it is still unnerving to go and put your name on a loan for $100,000+, right? And to shell out $10,000 plus for the trailer and the truck and all that stuff. So I didn't doubt it, but I definitely was a little nervous. So as far as the pricing questions, like how did we figure out what to charge? So figuring out what to charge when you're doing it per day is pretty simple. You have a general set cost for how much it costs for the operator, how much it costs for the fuel, for the machine to be running for 8 hours. Some of the things that a lot of people probably don't think about that costs a lot is your consumable items, so your grease, your towels. Oh my God, we go through so many towels, like rags, just stuff that you use on a daily basis really adds up. One of the other things too that's built kind of into the cost, although we're kind of figuring, maybe we should do it a different way, is the quoting. So like when we're going out and doing quotes, it costs us a lot of time and money to go out and do these free quotes. So, I did a quote today where it was an hour away. It was a large property, so we had to travel around on ATVs to look at the whole property. And I've got a half a day into that quote. I've got probably 2.5 hours of driving into that quote, so there's a lot of cost that goes into just getting somebody a quote. And we have to look at those costs and kind of build that into the price of the customers that do close, because if we didn't, we'd be losing money. So another thing that costs that are involved that people don't really think about is the cost of the employee to load up the skid steer. So just for them to come up and pick it up and load it up and strap it down and take it out to the job, that takes quite a bit of time, sometimes more than an hour just to get it loaded up, depending on what kind of attachments that need to go out. It's the same with taking it, rolling out. They've got to spend a lot of time just putting it back on the trailer, strapping it down, bringing it back and dropping it off. They've got to put grease in it. So there's a lot of things, a lot of costs that are hidden that I think that a customer doesn't necessarily see or think of with this kind of business. I kind of talked about, what mistakes did I make with our pricing early on. I kind of talked about that earlier, where we quoted by the day, then we switched to trying to quote per job, and then we ended up ultimately switching back to quoting per day. Customers like that more. I think it's easier to understand. It's more consistent. We don't, charge anybody more or less than anybody else. So you're buying essentially machine time. You're buying 8 hours with the machine, and that's how much it costs. So The quote process really is just me going out and seeing, like, trying to get you an idea of how many days or machine hours you're going to need. I'm looking at it and seeing, like, okay, is it thick? Is it hilly? Is it thin? Is there debris everywhere? Is there tires and metal and things that we're going to have to be working around? So I just go out there and get an idea of how much machine time you're essentially buying. Are there any crap jobs where we lost some money? Yes. So, and it wasn't necessarily, it was kind of a weird one where it was a steep hillside, and, we thought, when I went out there and did the quote, I thought, the skid steer should be able to do this, but I wasn't 100%. So Zach actually, when it came time to do the job, Zach loaded up the skid steer. I only quoted a day of service. He loaded up the skid steer, went out there, tried to cut with it, went up on the hillside. It was just too steep for him. So he didn't really get anywhere. And so he had to load it up, take it back. And then we had to figure out another solution. And obviously you can't charge a customer for that because you didn't really get anything done. But you've got a lot of money invested into that. So, and then it came time to, okay, well, what if we used a bulldozer, right? So we went out and we contacted Caterpillar to see about renting a bulldozer. We had to go to Caterpillar to go, submit our information to do it. We had to call the insurance company. And it turns out, like, that wasn't going to work either. So we have all this time invested and money invested into doing this. And then it came to, Bobcat kind of bailing us out there with letting us use the Green Climber as for another demo. So we got Bobcat to come out, but then you've got to arrange all of that, and you've got to work with Bobcat on their schedule, work with the customer on their schedule. Really, and you got to go out there and meet Bobcat. So you're still running the machine, even though they're going to let you use it. So just for, only for one day of service, the amount of hours that we put in, maybe we were there for 8 hours on the job, but we probably had 30 hours plus into this. So all of that time costs money, right? So at the end of the day, we lost money on that job. It is what it is. Those things happen. We learn things. We move forward, and we'll do better next time. So now I know if we can't do a certain slope grade, we'll have to use something else. So, okay. So is there a physical toll doing this work? Yes. So you would think that, and it's more on Zach than it is me because I'm mostly doing quotes and recording videos and stuff like that. But a lot of the physical toll on Zach is just, it's hard work moving that stuff around. There's a lot of heavy lifting. Just to replace a tooth on the machine requires, 400 foot-pounds of torque, and that's a lot. It's a long pipe and a strong dude to be able to do that. Zach has gotten out of the skid steer and banged his knee on stuff, and it was pretty bad too. It was really swollen. Even though you're jumping in a machine and running it all day, there's a lot of ways that you can get injured, or a lot of things that are very exhausting. So, another one is him getting out of the skid and having to move big heavy wire out of the way, or tarp that's under the mud, or, tires, stuff like that. So it definitely takes a physical toll. Not quite as much as other jobs, but it definitely does. Is there any stress of owning or running the business? I would not, yes and no. So, I'm not easily stressed out. I'm not that kind of person. But it does get stressful, especially when you get a lot of rain. It's tough because, right now we have the schedule completely stacked up. I mean, if it rains, it's tough because we've got to move everybody back. Even, typically what we would do is leave a day open, where if it rains, maybe we'll lose a day. It doesn't affect everybody else. But now we've just got so many jobs on the schedule that we need to get to them. And we had a wet winter. We've had a very wet spring. We've lost 2 weeks at the beginning of spring already. So I think the stress, if it comes from anywhere, it comes from scheduling. We want to get out to these customers' houses. We want to get the work done. But we also don't want to tear up their property in the meantime. So, but other than that, I'm pretty resilient. Not a lot of things stress me out. I don't know if I can speak for Zach, but he's similar to me. We've been running businesses for a while, so we've heard it all basically. So we've become pretty resilient. Do you have issues dealing with weather delays? Yes, that's our number one issue. I just kind of highlighted that a little bit. Weather delays are the worst. So not being able to go out and do work is just as bad as the machine going down. You lose a lot of money, you lose a lot of time, and it sucks. Is there an issue balancing this with family life? Yeah, definitely, I would say. So right now, actually, Zach's going out of town next week with his family for spring break. It's tough because we just pushed back a bunch of jobs for a couple weeks because of the rain, and then next week it's supposed to be really nice. But I always look at business in a way of you're doing it to enhance your life, not to take away from it, right? And so you don't want to take away from your family life, especially when you have these kind of opportunities like he has to go on a trip with them and stuff. And last year when we were starting out, he actually missed the family trip because we had so many jobs on the schedule. He felt kind of guilty, like he was leaving me out to dry. So he skipped the family trip last year. So this year he's going on it, and I think he should. So it does kind of suck that we lose a week of time, but at the same time, ultimately, it's more important to be with family. And as far as me, yeah, it's so I just had a baby girl. She's a month. Oh, I don't know. My wife knows by weeks, like 6 weeks old. So she's 6 weeks old. And so it's been crazy here at the house and going out and doing these quotes. And I try to do half days on doing quotes. So basically, especially when our daughter was first born, and even still, I try to just do half days or leave a day open. So I don't get to film as much as I want to. I don't get to as many quotes as I'd like to, or as quickly as I'd like to. But at the end of the day, like I said, family is the most important. That's why we do it. So that's why we work hard, is to support our families. So ultimately, at the end of the day, that's more important than money. Okay, question is, what makes it all worth it? Really, it's so for one, you get a lot of gratification from clearing the brush, right? So like imagine that feeling that you get when your grass gets overgrown and it's long, and you go out and you mow it and it's all freshly mowed, and like that satisfaction. Well, brush clearing is that times 10, right? So you took something that was completely overgrown, unusable, and you've opened up that space to where it can be used again. So we get a lot of satisfaction from that, and we really love that when the customers, like, they love it. When we're done, they just freak out because it's not something that they ever thought they were going to be able to use that part of their property again. They didn't know how they were going to get it done till they found us. And so it really, gives us a lot of happiness to be able to open up people's properties or cut trails for them that their kids are going to be able to ride four-wheelers on. And it's really cool. It's really satisfying, and we love it. What's my favorite kind of job? So This one's kind of easy. My favorite kind of job is trail cutting. So Zach and I, we really like off-roading. We're really into it, and especially when somebody has a lot of property and they're just kind of like, do whatever kind of trail looks cool or it looks like it'd be fun. And so we'll get like a satellite view and like map out the trails we're going to cut, and it's just really cool. They're easy. Trail cutting jobs are pretty simple, and really it wouldn't be easily done without the machine. So it's probably one of my favorites, and just being able to see and walk through the trails or ride through the trails after we're done with them, and they're really cool. So where do I see Brushworks in 5 years? So Brushworks in 5 years, I could see us running up to 4 or 5 mulching machines. If we did any less than that, we would also have a green climber. So let's say we had three machines, a green climber, and an excavator with a mulching head on it. I could definitely see that being achievable in the next 5 years. So that's ultimately the plan. And beyond that, we'll look to expand out into other markets. But yeah, so that's the plan. What are we working on next? So one of the things we've tossed around the idea of is a treatment service. So basically, after we brush clear, we'll treat the area with what's called Tordon. It's a wood killer. It basically kills everything from the root. It kills all of the honeysuckle at the root. We haven't really had customers having an issue with the honeysuckle coming back, because after we mulch it, they're able to just put their mower deck up and mulch it all the way through, or mow it all the way, and it keeps that brush from coming back up. But we've tossed around the idea of including that kind of service. We've also looking into the green climber, which will allow us to do the steep hillside jobs that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So that's another service we're kind of looking at offering. The green climber is very expensive, hard to maintain, and slower. So, but it can do things the skid can't, and things that otherwise people wouldn't be able to do without doing hand clearing. So we may get a green climber. We really want one, but we're kind of so booked out right now that it actually makes more sense for us to get another machine, and look at getting the green climber later. So my final thoughts, and the things that we've learned is that it's way more weather dependent than we imagined. And maybe I just feel like that now because we've gotten so much rain and had to move jobs around. But last year we got really lucky. It was very dry. But yeah, I mean, I realized too that there's a lot more need for this brush clearing than people just needing to open up their property. So for example, we were contacted by a Native American tribe that is tasked with maintaining the historical land, and they've got a bunch of overgrowth on it, and they can't just run a bulldozer over it, right? So they need a service like ours that can come up and clear the brush without disturbing the soil too much. And another thing we've kind of learned too is that there's actually instances where the state government requires that you provide our service. We actually just learned that recently. So very, very interesting. So if you've got a bunch of land and you've got it marked in some way, and I'm going to look into a little bit more. So I just learned it recently, but if you've got some sort of like forestry designation on your property, you are required to remove the invasive species, and you have to show progress towards doing that. Otherwise you get audited and you lose that status. And I imagine it's some sort of tax status, but yeah, that was something I never even knew before we started. It was like, what? Really? So that's kind of good, kind of, at the end of the day, though, I think it's your property. You can do what you want with it, but it is what it is. So yeah, I'm going to look into that more, but it is definitely something that was unique that I didn't even know existed. So if you guys like this video, give us a like, subscribe to the channel. If you have any more questions for me, feel free to reach out and send me a message, or ask us on our social media. So thanks for watching. Have a good one.